So much for joining us for today's webinar, where we'll take an in-depth look at the rising adoption of digital and social media within the commercial insurance industry and how that's impacting decision-making. My name is Ira Amelhusen from LinkedIn, and today we're very excited to share some brand new research that we've conducted around this topic and talk with our expert panel. Specifically, we wanted to understand in this research how the key players within the commercial insurance and the buying and selling ecosystem are using digital and social resources, and how that's changing the way agents and brokers are building relationships with clients on social media. And we discovered some very interesting insights and implications for how you can do that as an agent and broker successfully on LinkedIn. But before we get into this webinar, I have just a few housekeeping items. This webinar will last about an hour, including 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the webinar for questions. Also, your phone lines are muted by default, but you can use the Q&A box, the chat box on the right of your screen to ask any questions, and we'll be answering questions at the end. After the webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to the PowerPoint deck, the research ebook, and a recording of the webinar, so you can review any slides and rewatch the webinar at your own leisure. So, without further ado, let's get right into today's webinar. Today's webinar will include two parts, beginning with a presentation of the research by Emily Friedman. Hold on one second, I'm trying to advance my slides. Starting with Emily Friedman, a research consultant here at LinkedIn, and we'll have an engaging discussion with our panel of experts as we talk about what this research means to the commercial insurance industry. For our panel, we're very excited to welcome John Bell, who's the VP of Enterprise Digital Marketing at Travelers. And he'll talk about how they engage with this audience in social media and some of the best practices they've seen. And we also have Chris Keneally from our LinkedIn Sales Solutions team, who has a wealth of experience working with commercial insurance clients and brokers. So like I said, we have a lot of great content and insights for you today. So to kick off our discussion, I'll hand it off to Emily to take us through our research. Emily? Emily, are you on mute? Sorry, just bear with us as we work through some technical difficulties. Emily, are you on? Sorry, just bear with us as we work through these difficulties. There's always some kind of challenge with webinars, so just give us 1 minute as we work through this. Thank you. So while Emily is dialing back in, we're going to try and go through some of the methodology while she's dialing back in. So we conducted this survey on our platform at LinkedIn at the end of last year, and our sample was nearly 500 commercial insurance clients and nearly 300 commercial insurance producers, all on LinkedIn and in the U.S. And when we talk about what the criteria was for our clients, these are decision makers for influencers for commercial insurance and benefits at their organization. And then as far as the criteria for producers, these are independent or captive brokers that are selling at least one line of insurance or employee benefits. Emily, are you back on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Sorry, everyone.
No problem. I just walked through the methodology.
Perfect. Well, then I will jump right in for the next slide for key findings.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ira. So as Ira had mentioned before, I think when we set out to do this research, we knew that this audience generally doesn't have as high of a digital adoption compared to the rest of financial services. So we really wanted to better understand how social and digital resources are impacting clients' decisions about commercial insurance purchases in the way that we know they impact decisions in other sectors of the industry. Further, we wanted to assess the influence on how agents and brokers are selling to this audience and how they're communicating with prospects and building those relationships. So at a high level, what we found was that intermediaries, so those agents and brokers, are playing a really central role in the commercial insurance ecosystem. So 9 in 10 clients are using an agent or broker for their commercial purchases, and 43% are receiving at least weekly communication from their agent or broker. So they're getting a good amount of direct communication and maintaining those intermediary relationships. But at the same time, clients are increasingly relying on digital and social sources to discover and validate information, even if that's information that they're gathering through their agent or broker. So we found that more than 3 in 4 clients rely on professional networks for their roles, and about half of them plan to increase their reliance over the next year. Clients are also primarily looking for industry perspectives and potential agents and brokers when they're using digital and social sources. So we found, beyond just getting regular news and things that will keep them informed, they're actually seeking some perspectives from those in the industry or agents and brokers. Similarly, we found that agents and brokers are relying on digital and social sources to build their business. So 9 in 10 agents and brokers are relying on professional networks in particular. I believe we found this was just under their reliance on commercial insurance carrier domains. So 3/5 of that group plan to actually increase their reliance on digital or on professional networks over the next year. And in terms of what agents and brokers are mainly doing, they're prospecting for clients and doing things to differentiate their brand and show their expertise through social. And finally, where we'll sort of tie this back to results is looking at how commercial insurance professionals are driving tangible results through LinkedIn in particular. So we found 43% of agents and brokers on LinkedIn have actually found a new client through the platform, and about a quarter of clients have been influenced to work with a particular agent or broker given their use. So next we'll be looking into some specifics on these intermediary relationships. So we know that commercial insurance clients and their agents and brokers are responsible for a variety of risks and coverage lines. And this leads to a lot of information that both parties need to stay on top of. In terms of what clients are responsible for, we looked at the top lines, commercial coverage lines that they tend to either be responsible for purchasing or they're an influencer on those risks. So employee benefits and workers' compensation, no surprise that those are a main type of line. We found that those tend to have coinciding responsibilities about 90% of the time. Similarly, property and casualty, those ones are big ones as well, and that was about a 50% overlap. If someone is responsible for property risks at their organization and managing those insurance relationships, they're likely also responsible for casualty. And just looking at some numbers for this, in terms of the median number of lines that clients tend to be responsible for, that averages out at 4. So we're seeing about half of clients are responsible for 1 to 3 lines of coverage at their organization. And that does tend to be, when we see larger companies, clients from larger companies, they tend to have fewer lines of coverage that they're responsible for. And we're seeing that as potentially due to greater specialization within their company. So looking at the other side of line coverage on the agent and broker side in terms of what they're selling. So we found 11 is the median number of lines that an agent or broker is selling as part of their business. We found, though, that there are certain lines, so there are a lot of lines that are covered by the majority of agents and brokers in our survey, but certain lines were much more likely to be primary or core to their business. So if you look at the top part of this chart, we see property, casualty, workers' comp, auto, and employee benefits as those top coverage lines that are both represented by the majority of agents and brokers, but that if they're forced to select which is their top coverage line in terms of their primary business, these 5 all come out on top. On the other hand, we see for things like excess professional liability, E&O, D&O, cyber liability, and inland marine, more than 50% of agents and brokers have those lines as part of their business, but they're very rarely core to their business. And coming to this point about working with intermediaries, so as we mentioned before, 9 in 10 clients on LinkedIn use an agent or broker for at least some of their purchases. We found that this was about a little over 60% that use an agent or broker for all of their purchases. And then for those who aren't using an agent or broker, there tended to be some internal, someone who's licensed internally or something to that effect. But that tended to be at larger companies. And for the most part, we're seeing, again, a lot of continued relationships with intermediaries. But again, sort of we'll see later that clients are still going to digital sources to validate information that they're getting and supplement with the types of subject matter education that helps with the decisions they have to make. So of those clients who work with an agent or broker, we see regular communication between the two. So 43% of clients who use an agent or broker hear from them at least weekly. And when we look at company size, how that differs by company size, 54% of clients at enterprise-level companies hear from their agent or broker at least weekly, compared to 29% among small business clients. So definitely a difference across company sizes there. However, we didn't see that company size difference carry over into the satisfaction rates that they have with the communication they receive from their agents or brokers. So of the overall 43% of clients that get that weekly communication, 93% of those are satisfied with their communication from their agent or broker. That didn't vary significantly across company size, but we did see it vary across the frequency of communication. So if they heard even more frequently, they were likely to be more satisfied. That said, even at an overall level, regardless of how frequently clients are hearing from their agent or broker, 83% are satisfied overall. So again, we definitely see this as this type of communication is going to sort of remain the way it is and still be valuable to clients, but they'll be turning to other sources to supplement the information that they get. So again, even with intermediaries to consult, as we've been mentioning, clients are increasingly turning to digital sources to do their own research. When we look at these specific digital and social sources that are relevant to their business and what they're using these for, we found that 82% of clients rely on insurance carrier domains, followed by 77% of clients who rely on professional networks for their role. Beyond that, insurance trade publications came in third. So those 3 are pretty much on top. And when we look at their plans for the future in terms of using these digital sources, a good number are planning to increase. We had very low decreases overall, but about between a quarter and just under a half planning to actually increase their use over the next year, or sorry, increase their reliance for these sources when it comes to discovery, consideration, and validation of information. The same thing here for agents and brokers. We did see the same order of preference in terms of the digital networks with carrier domains, professional networks, and trade publications as the top 3. So I think key to note here is that 88% of agents and brokers are relying on professional networks to inform their roles, and about 60% of those are actually going to increase that reliance over the next year. So an enormous increase on an already pretty big reliance that agents and brokers have on professional networks. getting more specific now into their professional network use, we found that clients and their agents and brokers are leveraging LinkedIn for specific purposes, and they're driving tangible business results through this use. So on the client side, we had mentioned the key findings, the commentary and perspectives being the top purpose that they're going for on LinkedIn. So again, at an overall level, they're turning to LinkedIn to seek these perspectives, but also to vet agents and brokers. So if you see the gray bars on this chart represent the net that use at least one social network for each given purpose. And then the blue bar is showing of those what percent is actually turning to LinkedIn for that purpose. So pretty heavy on most of these purposes toward how they're leveraging LinkedIn, but the top purposes would be getting that sort of extra degree of commentary or perspectives on industry topics that they can get from a professional network and might not be on a more two-dimensional type of online, like a news resource. But they're also doing things like checking credentials and identifying prospective agents and brokers, so really using it for that sort of vetting purpose as well. And a quote that we got from one of the clients, just noting that LinkedIn is instrumental in their ability to leverage their network and find the best carriers and brokers for their needs. And that's no surprise, I think, when we see the results that they're finding, even so far. So a quarter of clients on LinkedIn have learned something from the platform that's actually influenced the decision to work with a particular agent or broker. And that rises to about a third among small business clients, so really likely to have influence on who they're choosing to work with. And overall, we definitely see a lot, about half of them are learning something that learning something about an agent or broker in general, so a really high percentage just overall seeking information about agents and brokers, and it's now starting to influence their decisions as well. So now looking at what agents and brokers are doing on LinkedIn, again, we saw that 88% leveraging professional networks overall, with a 59% planning to increase that reliance. So the top purpose, I think, is probably no surprise, where they're listing their credentials and areas of expertise. I think that's a pretty key area for agents and brokers to make sure it's kind of table stakes with their use on LinkedIn. But beyond that, they're doing their sort of due diligence on potential clients, identifying prospects, staying up to date on risks that are relevant to their prospects or clients. So a number of things that are both generating leads, getting clients, but also maintaining those relationships and making sure they, as agents and brokers, are on top of enough to be able to provide that value in terms of the risks that their clients need to stay on top of. Agents and brokers who use LinkedIn, the reasons that their use are so high, we see as the outcomes that they've had through their use. So we see that a lot of them have generated actual new business through their use of the platform. So in the middle there, starting at the highest, I guess, just over half of agents and brokers on LinkedIn have used the platform successfully to identify key influencers and decision makers at companies that they're going after. So that's a big one and definitely a great starting point for potentially some additional results they may have. Beyond that, we found 43% have found a potential new client through their use of LinkedIn, and the same percentage, 43%, have generated an opportunity from this use. And finally, we've got 42% who've asked for an introduction or referral using that functionality on the platform, and about a third have secured a meeting with a potential client given their communication with them on the platform. So a lot of, these are the top 5 outcomes that we saw, but a lot of great results so far from their use, and I think knowing that that usage and reliance is going to increase so significantly over the next year, we're definitely keen to see how these numbers increase. And a few quotes here just to give a little color to the broker and agent perspective from their LinkedIn use. So one is saying that they've found the most success using LinkedIn to research prospects. So they've had prospects review their profile where they've highlighted their education, experience, and writing, so things they may have published. And all of those that they're able to showcase on their profile are able to better distinguish themselves from other brokers. Another broker mentioned that LinkedIn affords the chance for warm introductions. So that person had a prospect that would have been a cold call, but they saw a connection between two people in their network. And I think that type of leveraging your network in sales is definitely something that we'll touch on in the panel questions later with some of our experts.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. I think this is really interesting research. We all know that social is really changing the way that we interact with our clients, but now it's great to have data points that show exactly how our audience is using social, what types of information they're looking for on our platform. And what we really saw is that that clients and these decision makers are using professional networks in particular to vet agents and brokers that they want to work with. And agents and brokers are really successfully using the platform to gain new business. So I'd love to use that research as a jumping off point to our panel discussion. So just introducing our panel once again, I'd like to introduce John Bell, the VP of Enterprise Digital Marketing at Travelers. John, it's great to have you. Can you give a quick introduction and take 1 minute about what you do at Travelers?
Certainly. So it's great to be here. So I head up Enterprise Digital Marketing here at Travelers, and essentially, as many of you probably know, to oversimplify, our business is focused both in the commercial line space as well as in the personal line space. And the mission of our team here in Enterprise Digital Marketing is clearly to sell insurance, to be as crass as possible, as I can be about this. I mean, it is more complex than that, but what we're doing is we're using content to engage both our agents and brokers, or equip our agents and brokers, as well as to connect with our prospects and customers towards some kind of accountable, measurable outcome, if you will. And so we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So we have a team here that's basically organized around marketing planning expertise, content development expertise, and then data and insights driving both of those two teams. So we're very much into a data-driven model here. And that kind of quickly summarizes what we're focused in on.
That's great, John. Thank you so much for joining us. And then also joining our panel, we have Chris Keneally, who is an Enterprise Account Executive here at LinkedIn. Chris, happy to have you. Can you give a quick introduction on what you do at LinkedIn?
Sure. Thank you for having me here today. I work for LinkedIn's newest division called Sales Solutions. So we work with financial services and corporate clients to teach them the best practices in leveraging LinkedIn for new business development, individual and company branding purposes. Certainly with the number of people we have on LinkedIn globally, I think that number is approaching 360 million members. We want to give our organizations and the people that work for them the best tool and solution possible to help them be more successful.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Chris. So I'd like to start off our panel talking about best practices. These are great insights, but I'd really love all our attendees today to walk away with some solid best practices that they can apply right away. And I'd like to open this up to all of our panelists to talk about what's worked on our platform. And Chris, I think it'd be great to hear your perspective just to start off on how, in your perspective, how LinkedIn can be used to successfully grow their business.
Sure. One of the things that we talk about here at LinkedIn, and whether it's an education session or it's a training session for one of our clients, building out your profile, that's where everything starts on LinkedIn. And to ensure that when people come to visit your profile that they're inspired to reach out to you, it's important that you have the necessary components, one being a picture. You're 14 times more likely to be viewed with a picture than without. So just that alone should get you some additional profile views. And the different components, having a headline, a summary, experience that isn't bullet pointed. this is your professional profile. So ensuring that you are not putting a resume out there, this is more like your online reputation. Displaying your credentials, because as we saw in the data, 54% of commercial lines companies are looking at their LinkedIn profile to check their credentials of a potential broker. So if you don't have that on there, you might be missing an opportunity. The second thing is about growing your network, facilitating warm leads by connecting with a broad range of contacts on LinkedIn. This does not mean go out and connect with everyone on LinkedIn. You need to make sure that the connections that you have are valuable to you. So even if you don't know the person, send a personalized invitation to connect, which gives them a reason to want to connect with you. Either they can help you professionally or you can help them professionally. It's about the quality, not the quantity of your connections. Engaging with your clients with the content they seek. If you know that you're connected with a certain section of folks, start curating and sharing content that speaks to them. You will have that top-of-mind awareness. Maybe they didn't say yes to you at that moment. Maybe they had an existing relationship. But if they continue seeing inspiring content and content that's important to them, when that does come up for renewal or they have an issue with their existing broker, chances are that you're going to be the one that they call. Establishing yourself as an influencer is something I took a step in this year with regards to long-form content posts on LinkedIn. I wrote my first content piece about your LinkedIn profile and establishing your brand and not being just another face in the crowd. And this is a great way to establish yourself as a subject matter expert, ensuring that when you share that out, you call or email 5 or 10 of your connections that are higher influencers on LinkedIn that are using it, are engaged and have big networks, and you ask them to share that out to their networks. The more people and the amplification of your message that gets out there, the chances are that you're going to have more inbound leads and people wanting to connect with you that can certainly help you professionally.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. John, any perspectives from travelers' point of view as far as best practices or any comments?
Sure. Yeah, no, sure. I think, first of all, we use kind of LinkedIn, I would say, in 2 ways, just to oversimplify for the sake of this call. One is it's a content marketing platform for our commercial lines kind of businesses, and that's where we're kind of building relationships between the brand and the agents and brokers we serve and the customers. A nice 3-way relationship there we always try to keep in mind, where we're actually trying to deliver some highly useful content out through our brand channel, and we're using a lot of the great paid, we always talk about paid owned earned, and the truth is in LinkedIn, we've got this wonderful targeting capability in the sponsored posts that we use to actually reach individuals who we really want to touch. So that's one way. The second way is about enabling our specialists, if you will, and I'll talk about who that is later, to build and energize their own network. And this is what this slide is really kind of pointing us to. So for us, again, it's about building relationships both with agents and brokers and the customers that we both serve. And what we've learned, and we believe in all 4 of these things, and we've put them into practice, and we've run workshops on them and tuned up groups, if you will, of folks. And if I were to call out like 2 key learnings, building your profile is easy, comparatively. It's easy, especially with the right instruction for what does strengthen a profile. The growing your network is the piece that I think a lot of folks kind of overlook the importance of that. They figure, well, I've already got a bunch of folks following me. Once my profile's reputable and credible, I could just share out content with them. And the truth is, we have learned to become much more intentional about building out each of our own personal networks. So we have guys and gals who have specialisms in, the manufacturing business and risk, or construction and risk. And for them, it's about figuring out which agents and brokers are most focused on that those lines of business and which customers or prospects are, and intentionally building their connections. And that was, the effort to do that and the importance of doing that was one key insight, and helping people to accomplish that was one key thing. The other, I think, is it's not just any content. So for us, our team is actually promoting out or sharing out pre-approved content that we at Travelers author. We spend a lot of energy trying to understand what people, business customers and the agents who serve them want and what they need in relation to supply chain risk or construction defect risk and things like that, and create that content. This gives our team members who are empowered on LinkedIn the right stuff to share out. And, we're a conservative industry. We like to be thoughtful. That's my code word for we like to stay within the guardrails of what, the legal teams are comfortable with our folks sharing out there. So, anyhow, 2 insights in our own application of these.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much. So, John and Chris, the research definitely shows pretty clearly that that brokers are the point of entry in commercial insurance, and they frequently communicate with clients via digital and social. So what do you see as the biggest business opportunity with social media?
Well, this is John Bell. I'll jump in, but let you direct us as you see fit. Clearly, we're all focused in on, 3 big things, right? New business / acquisition, retention, and the broader goal of strengthening customer relationships, which, does result in retention, but also upsell and so forth and so on. And so the key is to figure out how digital marketing, or LinkedIn specifically, can strengthen any one of those 3 areas. You have to keep in mind, I'm speaking from a carrier's point of view, and we treasure our relationships with our independent agents and brokers who are on the front lines of selling, quite frankly. And so I'm just as keen to strengthen their hand at their own sales and marketing, if I can, if I have anything to offer. I think that if I were to kind of not hedge around your question so much and say, well, where do I see some of the great near gains? Clearly, for us, we've seen a lot of wins on warm leads that turn into leads.
Right.
I think the natural, this is the great thing about, and I'm not trying to be a poster boy for LinkedIn, because you all have strengths and weaknesses. Yet the truth is, the natural ability for me to connect with folks, in this environment. It's a pull-based environment, so people will connect with me if they think that will be valuable to them. And if I prove to be valuable by sharing things or being, a human being with them over time, then they'll stay connected. And if I don't, they might not. So I think the warm leads has been a huge gain for us. I think it's also, oddly enough, it's a great way for us to share expertise or practical content that can be useful to other people.
Right.
So I think those are 2 areas, and then that establishes us as a credible authority, if we do it right, in the areas that we really care most about and have a lot of specialism in.
Right.
And that content gets in the hands of agents and brokers, and they can take a portion of that and use that in their communications. I know that agents and brokers, we've talked to a lot, I've been out on the road, and I know a lot of them are on the phone right now, and I know that they have the need to build their own brand. They don't want to just share out Travelers content.
Right.
They need to create some of their own. But, and at the same time, they're challenged with what we're challenged with, filling out a full content calendar. And some of that's stuff you create, and some of that stuff you curate. And we're creating a lot of stuff we hope our agents and brokers can curate and use in their communications.
That's great. Chris, anything to add to that as far as what do you see as the biggest opportunity to take advantage of these insights?
Well, I think there's 2 opportunities, and it's just piggybacking off of what John said. Certainly the carrier to independent agent channel, they're independent agent for a reason. the opportunity to write business through a variety of different companies. And I think the more that the carriers are doing to connect with those agents and to fill them with the information they need for them to be successful out to their clients, you know, that'll strengthen that relationship, as well as being informed of the things that are going on in that agent's life. You know, what they have on their LinkedIn profile, what they're sharing, work anniversary. You know, some people still have birthdays on their LinkedIn profile, but having that information is oh so important. And then on the flip side, agent to client, you know, there are, I think the biggest opportunity is that top of mind awareness for those that are more engaged in social. These social influencers, they're getting more opportunities because of their social engagement and their social presence. You know, the two golden tickets in sales are referrals and inbound leads, and social sellers are getting those more often than non-social sellers. You know, when you talk about being informed on clients and prospects, you know, knowing what's going on in their world, having information that they're sharing on LinkedIn, or if you're meeting with a decision maker and it's renewal time and you notice that he was mentioned in the news, it's information you can bring up in the conversation that, you know, gives you more credibility, or even on the prospect side. Being able to send an email or send an email mentioning, hey, I saw that you were, you know, part of a panel discussion on commercial insurance on April Fool's Day. I'm just kidding. You know, it brings it home. People like to have their ego stroked, and being able to have that information and share it with them, it helps build your professional brand as well. So I think the biggest opportunity, you know, here is the social engagement from both the carrier side as well as the agent side. You know, the carriers, their clients are the agents, and the more they can do to help those agents be successful professionally, the longer they're going to stay with them.
Great. That's great. So, John, I'd love to dive deeper into your comments about arming the brokers with content, brokers and agents with content, and helping them to fill out that content calendar, and that being one of the biggest challenges. How do you arm them and train them to be thought leaders on social with this content?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I think what we do is we have our own commitment to creating what we hope is useful content. And when I say we hope, I mean we actually do a lot of work to really understand what people are searching for, what our business customers and prospects are searching for in relation to certain risk and kind of vertical areas. What are they saying? And as much as there is any social chatter around that, clearly, you know, we spend a lot of physical time with our customers. So we're doing our best to kind of keep our ear closer and closer to the ground. So it's not just we think this content is cool. And that leads us to create a collection of content in areas that, you know, clearly align to our business. So if we have priority areas in manufacturing or construction or technology vertical companies, or in horizontals like cyber and worker safety, that's where we have the ability to kind of harness our experts. We don't call them experts, although I guess I just did. But, you know, these are the guys and gals in our risk control group who are focused on understanding what it means to keep drivers in a fleet safer, what it means to kind of reduce or manage the risk of new kind of solar installations in business. Anyhow, they're really wonderfully geeky kind of research experts, and we take their expertise and package it into content to share out. And now a broker or an agent who has a overlap in that area, like their practice area might include manufacturing, now has the ability to share out that expert content, whether it be a video, short video, right? Formats matter a lot. So 1 to 3 minutes of video, how-to or explainer videos. With those experts, they have articles that they can refer to with our experts in it, quotes that they can use in their own blog posts, infographics that, again, simplify an idea into a conversational thought starter data point. And basically fill out their own calendar with that. So we're trying to create content that they find useful, that agents and brokers will find useful in sharing with their customers and prospects as well. I will say this, that I think that, you know, our experience has been that agents and brokers, you know, run the gamut. They're a savvy bunch. A lot of them are very digitally active. I presume those on the call today are exactly that, digitally active. They get it. They're as sharp on this as I am or you are. And then there's others who, you know, are a little bit, you know, set in their ways, if you will. And I think that what we're seeing is a growing minority embracing digital marketing in general, and including this wonderful aspect of using LinkedIn as a way to drive warm leads and, you know, affect acquisition and also help and retain customers. So we have a road ahead of us, basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and we saw from the research that those that are actively communicating via social are seeing more success, and their customers are happier. So definitely a motivation to start using it. Great, and I'm glad you mentioned the format as well. We've, as far as the content that you're sharing, we've done research in the past that shows that really a variety of content formats is what works best. Not always sharing articles or not always sharing PDFs, but mixing it up with video, infographics, different visual media. So everyone that learns differently has something to take away from it.
Just to build on that, I mean, so we created something called the supply chain pressure test, which essentially is an interactive diagnostic. I call it a light interactive. It's not meant to take the place of a consultation from either an agent or broker or a traveler's expert on the customer side, but it's meant for middle market manufacturing customers and maybe smaller manufacturing customers as well as a conversation starter. And it's just as easy that be between the agent broker and the prospect, or with travelers in the conversation. Imagine, if you will, that you can send over this diagnostic, which anyone can do in about, I don't know, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, to really open your eyes to the breadth of exposures in supply chain from a manufacturer's point of view, merely to get it to help a customer who may not have a strong risk manager in place because they're just not that big a business, really give them the opportunity to see the playing field, right, of where the risk is. And that can tee up a productive conversation and the next day as the agent broker comes in to have a meeting, or the agent broker / carrier come in to have a meeting to really figure out if there's areas that they want to shore up or address. And so that interactive content is not so easy for everyone to create, right? I mean, it's costly. I mean, I invested a fair amount of energy creating it, but to make that available now to agents and brokers in their conversations, to add to the mix, not to dominate the mix, I think is how we can be of service to the agents and brokers. Exactly.
Yeah, we've seen time and again in our research that that customers are doing their own research online and on digital. It's a do-it-yourself medium. So they're educating themselves before they even talk to a salesperson. So it behooves you to kind of supply them with that knowledge during that education phase, so that when they are ready to talk to someone, they talk to you. So, Chris, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think, the fact that you can get tied up into one medium and, sharing the same thing over and over again, article after article, chances are it's not going to get read. It's not going to get viewed. It's not going to get reshared. And what you're doing is just taking up some of these news feeds. It's interesting, I was looking at my posts from last year and the engagement levels, and the most highly engaged pieces that I shared were the ones that had the least amount of words on them. People don't want to be consumed with, a 2-page article because they're just not going to read it. If you get your point across in the fewest number of words, I think you'll start to see more engagement from your network, and certainly out of your initial network, because it'll start getting reshared and I think becoming that subject matter expert across the different mediums will be much more beneficial to your business.
Right. Yeah, and to just pause on that, what Chris is referring to is the ability to do long-form posting, which is what LinkedIn rolled out middle of last year, but it really allows all of our members to position themselves as experts. So you're not just relying on an author or an expert within your company. You can actually be the subject matter expert with your own long-form post and start growing the shares, start growing the views on LinkedIn. So I definitely recommend that to anyone that hasn't tried it yet. So another topic I'd love to introduce is the idea of a social selling index, and that's something that we have here at LinkedIn. Chris, would you be able to talk to the social selling index and what that means? And Emily, I think we can piggyback off of that with that what we saw in the research relating to that.
Sure. Do you have the slide for that?
No, we don't. But if you can give just a quick overview of what the social selling index is,
sure.
And what that means, then we can jump on.
So social selling index is a term that we have come up with here at LinkedIn, and really it's what's your social engagement through the use of LinkedIn and the platform. It starts out with your profile completeness. Do you have a picture, a headline, a summary with at least 100 words, experience, education, and then also some skills. And based on your profile, as well as your engagement on LinkedIn, liking and commenting, the number of connections you have, this number is created, and the average LinkedIn user has a social selling index somewhere around 25, so it's 0 to 100. I've seen as low as 7 or 8, and I myself actually about 6 months ago had a 100. And that's because I'm on LinkedIn all day long, and the things I do are actually pretty engaging once in a while. But what you really need to think about with this is it's not necessarily what your number is now, but where it can grow to by taking advantage of some of the best practices I talked about earlier. And certainly connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to learn a little bit more. But taking your social engagement and kind of supercharging it, maybe sharing one extra piece of content per week or adding some additional connections each week, participating in groups and discussions. These are all the things that are going to help you build your social selling index and ultimately build your professional brand. The long-form content posting, certainly being a subject matter expert in something and sharing your views on that will be potentially extremely beneficial for your business. This is not the end-all, be-all. There are people that don't have extremely high social selling indexes but do extremely well. But the data that we have, the higher social sellers will be more likely to exceed their quota than those that have lower social selling indexes.
Exactly, and that's what we saw in our research too. Emily, can you speak to what we saw regarding the social selling index and the success on our platform?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, Chris had just mentioned that we saw those with a higher social selling index tend to exceed their quota. We had that in the survey. They're especially likely to have found a new potential client as well. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So we found they're actually 3 times as likely to have found a new potential client if they have a higher social selling index versus lower. They're 5 times as likely to accelerate a deal cycle compared to those with a lower SSI score. So as Chris had mentioned, those the way that the index is looked at, the social selling index, the components, I think there are about 5 or so of them, the components that make up that index are all things that kind of tie in really well with the use cases that we see a lot of these agents and brokers having on LinkedIn through the survey. So things like how they're building their network and a lot of the posting and sharing and engagement points that Chris was just mentioning are really key to driving that. So it's definitely a good indicator that those types of behaviors and leveraging the platform in that way can really yield some heightened results.
Great. Okay, a lot of great best practices and takeaways. I'd love to turn to our audience now for a Q&A session. We have about 5 minutes left, so go ahead and type in your questions on the Q&A box on your right. I do see some that we can start off with here. This one looks like it would be a good question for Emily. Can you provide a definition of small, medium, and enterprise, the breakouts for company size? Is that by revenue, number of employees, and what are the breakpoints?
Sure. Yeah, so that was by number of employees. So for small businesses, we looked at those with fewer than 50 employees. Medium was 50 to just under 1,000, and enterprise was 1,000 and up.
Got it. Great. We have a question here on, is there a benefit to using individual LinkedIn accounts as opposed to using a company LinkedIn page? I believe that it's important to use both. If you're running a small business, you want to have both your individual LinkedIn profile to start growing your network, and also your company page, so you can talk about your individual products, what your company, your brand is, your identity. So it's important that you grow both of those. John and Chris, do you have anything to add regarding that?
This is John Bell. I would agree that it's important to do both. We do both. So the brand channels that we use, the brand channel on LinkedIn is our ability to really share out content that reinforces what we feel we're great at and can help people with. Our personal accounts that we're kind of tuning up different groups here to reach out to agents, brokers, and customers as well. It's just a different channel. It's taking advantage of, I don't know if how long everyone's been around, but I've been around a while. And I remember we used to call social media personal media back in the quaint days. And that was reflective of a certain quality here, which is that the connection you make with someone you know tends to have more influence, depending upon some other factors, of course, overall. So they go together quite well. I wouldn't choose one over the other, but clearly if you're a smaller business and you need to start somewhere, I think you have to make some choices.
Great. Here's another question on industries. John, we'd love to get your take on this. Which industries or categories are the brokers and agents finding they reach the best on LinkedIn? We have agriculture, retail.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I don't have an authoritative answer from an agents and brokers point of view, and I hope people understand that. But I can tell you this: this is one of the beauties of our relationship with you guys at LinkedIn, is that we actually have done quite a bit of research with LinkedIn to understand the complexion of vertical audiences. In other words, again, I'll just stick with the examples I've been giving. Between folks in the manufacturing space, folks in the construction space, folks in the tech space, technology companies, really understanding what, first of all, what's the audience complexion in the, you tell me, 350 million universe. Again, our business is kind of geographically constrained, so we're only interested in a certain space. And what's very valuable about that activity is that it can demystify some things. So, for instance, I thought, hypothetically going into that construction, we're talking about large contractors, small contractors, a whole bunch of folks you all know quite well that serve them, would be nowhere on this platform. And it would be like difference between technology, which you would expect to be, kind of all over this. And it turned out that all three groups were really well represented. Yes, of course, there's a kind of better complexion or a more denser complexion of technology professionals, but manufacturing, from small, medium to large, and the same even in construction was eye-opening. So I think we should not we can't presume too much. We really have to try to get the answers of who's on LinkedIn and who's not. And I know that there are DIY ways for you to get a general sense from looking at the groups that are comprised in LinkedIn in different verticals. Someone mentioned agriculture a few minutes ago. You can do that type of research to get a kind of a heuristic kind of guide as to whether or not a particular population is on and active in LinkedIn.
Right. Yeah, I can say if you haven't tried it yet, definitely try the search, the advanced search tools on LinkedIn. There's a lot of really great ways that you can drill down into industry and kind of grow your network that way and see who's on the platform. So definitely try that search functionality on LinkedIn. So it looks like we have time for one more question.
Hey, Ira?
Sure, yeah.
Can I just interject one thing? When you're reaching out to people and inviting them to connect, please, please, please personalize that invitation. Even if it's saying, hey, I've been on the webinar with you today. I'd like, enjoyed hearing your views on some best practices on LinkedIn. I'd like to connect with you. Right. Or we went to the same college. Please personalize it. It shows that you actually took a moment, looked at their profile, saw that there's a synergy between the two individuals. It's very important in building your professional brand.
That's a great point. Great point. Yeah, people do get a lot of requests, so anything you can do to personalize it is huge. So last question, I think, John, this would be a good one for you. What do you see the benefit is of using LinkedIn as opposed to Facebook? And I didn't write that myself. That actually came through.
For us, obviously, some of this is just common sense that a lot of you guys on the phone, on participant side already know. It is a professional network. So this is, we tend to focus in on our commercial lines kind of communications on LinkedIn more than Facebook, even though we're well aware that small business is on Facebook as well. It's just a different intention. When we're on LinkedIn, when others are on LinkedIn, they're trying to take care of business overall. I think small business may be trying to attract and engage customers via Facebook, but when it comes to, tuning up their sales and marketing capabilities and so forth and so on, I think LinkedIn is a great place to start. So, okay, let me unpack that so I don't leave you with a confusing idea. Great opportunities on Facebook for small business. Better opportunities, I think, on LinkedIn for some small, but all the way up through, large business. And I think the targeting capabilities of getting to people in certain roles at certain companies is just unrivaled from LinkedIn. Again, I'm not trying to be a poster child for the platform, but it has proven a lot more valuable to us on the commercial lines relationships with our agents, brokers, and the customers we all serve.
Great. Thank you so much. And it looks like that's all we have time for today. I think we had a great discussion. Thank you to our speakers, John, Chris, and Emily. Thank you all for attending. I'd like to plug our next webcast on April 8th. We are having a webcast on moving to always on for your finance marketing strategy. So great tips on content marketing, having an always-on strategy like we talked about today. And we'll actually be hearing from some thought leaders in the finance marketing space from Contently, from Digitas, BlackRock, and Personal Capital. So definitely join us on April 8th for that webcast. I'll send a note to everyone that attended with the link to join that. So with that, I'd like to also plug our marketing site, marketing.linkedin.com, for more info on how you can reach this audience on LinkedIn. You'll also see some case studies that you can learn a lot from as well. So definitely visit that site, marketing.linkedin.com. So with that, I'd like to once again thank our panelists. Thank you all for joining us today, and fill out the survey as you log out. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.